Welcome to EngagementB2B.com's lecture series entitled The Essentials of B2B Value-Based Marketing. In this session, we're going to examine the question, how can a firm estimate customer value? Hi, my name is Jim Naris, and I'm going to be today's speaker. The answer to the question is basically you have to learn how customers gain value. Now, most of you that are seasoned salespeople probably do this intuitively, but in today's complex era, it's important that companies have a rigorous and continuous process for evaluating customer value. Now, we're going to argue that in order to truly understand the value that a customer gains from your product, you're going to have to know things such as the customer's goals and problems, their basic requirements, how they buy your product, how they use your product, and any annual strategic initiatives that their company may in fact be initiating in a particular year. All right, now, it turns out that there are a variety of tools, and we're going to argue that you need to triangulate. Now, by triangulate, we're using it in the geometry and military sense, which basically means that you have to come at value from a variety of different perspectives using different tools in order to get a comprehensive handle on what value is to that customer. We're going to look at 6 tools: value and use analysis, perceived value measurement, Bayesian analysis, experimentation, peer reviews, and customer journey modeling and mapping. All right, let's begin with what might be called the granddaddy of value analysis, which comes out of operations management in the area of industrial engineering. It's referred to as value and use analysis. And basically what value and use analysis is a scientific side-by-side testing of 2 competitive products. So in the little illustration here, you can see an iPhone and a Samsung Galaxy. And basically what a consumer might do when he or she is trying to decide which smartphone to get would be to lay them side by side and do a series of tests to determine which one is superior. Now, typically, being in business-to-business marketing, we tend to be more scientific, we tend to be more technical. So this type of analysis we feel very comfortable with. It's most appropriate when the value and cost drivers are overwhelmingly tangible and measurable. So obviously you can't do a value and use analysis if you can't come up with measures to determine which one is superior. Now, typically we look at not only the economics of a particular product, but also prior performance dimensions of that particular product. Now, these side-by-side tests can be either conducted inside the supplier's laboratory or, even better, in the field in the customer's operations. And the reason that that turns out to be superior is that if the customer is involved in the testing, they tend to be a little bit more credible, and the customer tends to believe them a lot more. So we have a tendency to start with value and use analysis if the product has tangible drivers that we can evaluate. All right, now with consumer products, fortunately or unfortunately, those types of metrics are not available. And in fact, with a lot of consumer products, decisions are based on things like status, sex appeal, reputation, and image, which are perceptual rather than tangible. So if we come up with a product whose value is largely perceptual in nature, obviously we have to turn to a perceived value measurement type of system. This typically involves marketing research, and that involves some sort of customer survey. These can be conducted by one-on-one field interviews. They can be conducted in focus groups, or they can be conducted in some sort of online electronic survey. And typically we're going to collect data through importance ratings, which you might have them evaluate a product benefit on a scale of 1 to 10, or what's referred to as a conjoint analysis, where basically you're going to ask the customer to trade off potential product benefits versus alternative prices to determine what each one of those benefits is worth to them. In the way of comparisons, I might look at previous studies, or I might go out and see if there are other consulting or multi-client studies that basically have evaluated the value of this particular product in the past. So once again, if the product benefits are largely perceptual, I'm going to use a perceived benefit rating system. All right, now the third alternative is what's referred to as Bayesian analysis, or I can simply call it probability analysis. When do I use Bayesian analysis? When the value and cost outcomes are probabilistic in nature. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, the last time you went out and bought a car, you probably had the opportunity to purchase an extended labor warranty contract, which basically guaranteed that if your product ran into certain physical problems that you could bring it in and labor would be covered and perhaps parts. Well, that's a probabilistic contract in that, some people buy a car and they never have any problems with it. Whereas alternatively, someone might buy a lemon and end up having repeated problems. So whether or not you get value out of one of these extended warranties or alternatively, guarantees is going to be a function of probability. So I don't know going in. I have to look at the probabilities to determine what it's worth. Typically, we turn to what's called actuaries or actuarial science, which you see quite commonly in the insurance industry. And basically what an actuary does is evaluate the probability of a particular occurrence, largely of a malady or problem, and then rates that probability and determines a fair price based on the likelihood of that particular outcome. They'll evaluate past usage results. So, for example, an automobile company might look over a period of years at the number of recalls they had for a particular defect, or the number of problems with brakes or steering systems, and through that they establish a set of probabilities as what the likelihood is going to be. So I turn to a Bayesian analysis when both the value and the cost outcomes are probabilistic in nature. Experimentation. If I'm launching an innovative, new-to-the-world product, there are no reference points. I don't know what this product is, how it's going to work, and more importantly, the customer doesn't know either. As a result, they're not necessarily sure what they should pay for the product, what its value is. In here, value-based marketers turn to auction methods. Now, most of you are familiar with what's referred to as a British auction. And in a British auction, the price starts low, and over a period of time, the price goes up until only one person remains. So the final person in an auction ends up winning the product. The alternative to this is what's called a Dutch auction, and a Dutch auction reverses the process. So the product is set high and is lowered to the point where someone chimes in and makes a bid on the process. So here we start high, and the winner of the product is going to be the last bidder for that particular product. Now, the reason that this distinction is important is that a British auction favors the seller, whereas a Dutch auction favors the marketer. So we have a tendency to prefer Dutch auctions. In experimentation, basically what you do is you set the price extremely high and you lower it periodically until you reach the point where you hit sufficient volume to meet whatever your volume goals are. So rather than you determining what the price and hence the value is of the product, you let the customer determine it based on supply and demand. So when do I use experimentation? When I've got an innovative, new-to-the-world product where there are no benchmarks. All right, one of the commonly used tools today are what are referred to as customer journey modeling and mapping. Modeling means it's done at a more abstract general level, such as the steps you can see on this chart: awareness, interest, consideration, purchase, retention, or advocacy, or customer journey mapping, where you literally map out the steps in flowchart fashion that the customer goes through. Now, why would I do one of these models or maps? Well, if I need to look at individual customers, individual segments, or individual industries because there's something unique or different about how they buy the product, or more importantly, there's been a lot of innovations and they do things differently. So basically what I do is I sit down with the customer and I go through their process from the initial discovery that they have a problem, through purchase, through usage of the product, through reordering of it. And what I tried to do once I have all the steps laid out is to determine how I can make the process a lot better by improving their customer experience and making everything a lot easier, quicker for them. So I add value by reducing the complexity of the buying process. So customer journey modeling and mapping is an alternative technique that's used a lot today in the IT industries. And lastly, one of the techniques that has emerged are peer reviews. You see this a lot in consumer industries. So for example, when I go to a new town and I don't know the restaurants, I pull out my smartphone and turn to Yelp, and Yelp gives me not only a listing of restaurants nearby, but also ratings and comments based on them. In a peer review, basically you're doing a value assessment by asking previous users of the product what their estimates of value, what were their experiences were like, was this product worthwhile, was it easy to deal with this particular supplier. So rather than doing some kind of quantitative analysis in the traditional sense, I'm evaluating customer experiences. And there's a variety of these tools that are out there, both internal and external to the customer firm. Internal to the customer firm are what are referred to as vendor scorecards. And basically what a vendor scorecard is a satisfaction rating that typically the operations people do. And they have everyone that has any contact with the supplier and its products evaluate not only the product but also the ease of dealing with the supplier. They formulate it into a rating, summarize comments, and then circulate that internally to anyone that's interested. Now I can similarly go externally and get online reviews, and there are a number of online review sites that are basically populated by customer managers. A good example of this is Vendop.com, and basically what they do is that they provide reviews, not only ratings such as the 5-star system that you see here, but also comments from professionals. And then I can also go to online professional communities. You know, LinkedIn is probably the classic example of that, where I can chat in forums with my peers who have used the product and find out how they have felt about the product and the supplier. So an alternate method of customer value assessment is peer reviews, where I'm asking my peers and other companies to evaluate how good a particular product is. All right, so in summary, there's a variety of tools available for you to use. You want to triangulate, which means that you want to use several tools to gauge the true value that the customer has. Now, which of these tools are you going to use? Well, that's going to be a function of your situation, your industry, and more importantly, how your customer views the product. Once again, if you want to get into more detail about it, we have 2 books available: Value Merchants, which is a managerial treatment, and Business Market Management, which is an academic textbook. And once again, if you want to learn more about our ongoing research, you can go to our research website, engagementb2b.com. All right, now in our next session, we're going to take the research findings that we've come up with from using these tools, and we're going to put them into a value model which you can use not only as a sales tool, but also as a product development tool. Thank you very much for listening today, and we hope you find value in whatever endeavor you have on your agenda today.